I hope you can see the screen, which is being shared right now. Yep, Dennis can hear us. And then there is one more attendee, Siddharth. I hope, Siddharth, you can hear me and see the screen as well. Well, we'll start with a brief revision of sorts, like a recap to what we did yesterday and what you can find on the offline video as well. Yeah. So yes, well, yesterday or like in the first session, we started off with some basic introduction to Rhino, understanding the user interface, and starting off with few things such as how to add points, how to convert the points into lines, lines to curves, and how to make pipes out of these lines. So we moved on from points to lines, curves, and then to some surfaces. We also saw how to get some undulations on the pipes. And we have also seen a small little exercise at the end where we saw how to make a canopy out of these tools that we learned for the day. During the little tutorial for the canopy, we also learned how to divide a curve, how to tween between two curves, and generate more curves that show sort of a transition from one curve to another. And that was it. We also made some little modifications to the default user interface that comes up with Rhino. We made sure that we had these ribbons which are permanently on for us. So I will just talk about it. So like if someone has missed it, they can make sure that these ribbons are on. So make sure that all the ribbons that are checked are also checked in your case. You can see this by clicking the little gear kind of icon which says options for these display ribbons, and you just go there and make sure all of these are on. Okay, so display, layers, lights, named views, notifications, properties. All of them are on. Okay, and we also made some decisions on the fly while choosing which object snaps to turn on while making different operations. Like for example, end snap was on while picking up some points on the edges or on the end points of the curves. We checked the point object snap on while we were making polylines on top of already existing points, and such and such. So today we are going to start off with how to make surfaces, how to modify these surfaces, making surfaces from curves, making surfaces from other surfaces, and towards the end we will model one or two existing buildings which have some really interesting forms. And we will see some really quick little tips and tricks to increase the speed of our workflow. So let's just dive right in. If you have any doubts from yesterday while you were probably practicing today, maybe I'm just going to wait for like, let's say 1 or 2 minutes. If you have some doubts, you can put them out on the Q&A section and we'll have them answered. Okay, there seems to be no confusion at all, which is slightly scary, but that's okay. Let's start off. So the first and the most common command that we're going to see while exploring surfaces is the extrude command that obviously you have found in many other 3D modeling softwares, including AutoCAD. So it's not rocket science for any of you, but still, let's go through it. So I'm just going to start off by making some curves, or let's say some closed curves in this case, to get to extrusions. So I'm just going to start off by making, let's say, a circle. Okay, so I have a circle and I'm going to extrude it into a cylinder. Well, I can directly make a cylinder, but yeah, let's see how to extrude this circle. So I'm just going to type extrude. By default, it says extrude curve. So that's exactly what we want to do, extrude this curve. And we say extrude curve, select the curves to extrude. This is the guy. I press enter or space, whichever is comfortable. And now it gives me a dynamic display of the final preview of how it's going to be extruded. Well, I haven't clicked yet, so the command is not done yet. I'm still in the middle of the command. And I have some options here in the little parenthesis that we discussed yesterday. The first is direction, which says that the default direction is right now in 0, 0, 1, which means the Z axis, but I can give any other direction if I want. I'm going to keep the default as is. Then it says, do I want to extrude on both the sides? The default is no, but let's see what happens if I say yes. And yeah, it extrudes on both the sides, but obviously like the Z direction and the negative Z. So that's the both sides. I'm going to say no. And then it says, do you want it to be a solid or not? I'm saying yes. If I say no, then this is what I get. This is like a hollow cylinder, not a cylinder with caps on it. So this is a hollow cylinder. For now, I'm going to say, okay, I don't want it to be solid. Then it says, do you want to delete the input? As in, do you want to delete the initial circle that you made and then convert it into this extrusion? The default is no, but yeah, let's say I'm going to say yes. Do you want to extrude it to a boundary? Well, I don't have a boundary as such, but I can say what extrusion distance I want. It says, do you want to set a base point for the extrusion? These are just limits for the extrusion to be like, I can limit the extrusion to a base point or to a boundary as such, but no, I don't have any of those specifications yet. So I have said, delete the input, don't keep it as a solid, and do not extrude it on both the sides, extruding in the Z direction. And now I hit spacebar. And it's done. So now if I go back and try to select my initial curve, it has been deleted. This is very helpful when you have a lot of geometry, a lot of curves, and you're just interested in the final outcome of what you're making. So well, yeah, that's the extrude command. We have seen, like, extrude is very, very primitive for this. Let's see another one. Let's see another way to make surfaces from curves. This one is also similar to softwares which have 3D modeling embedded in them. I'm just going to go to the front view now to more easily make this little surface or curve that I'm going to make now. So I'm going to start off by making a line, and just to show you, this is a line in the Z axis which I've just made. I made it by going to the front view, or I could have also gone to the right view. But how do I make it in the perspective view? Like if I make a line here, it doesn't really go like this. It doesn't really go in the Z axis. How do I make sure? Well, to make sure that you are drafting in the Z axis, you have to start the line, press Control, and click at the starting point. Press Control, keep it pressed and then click. The moment you do this, you will see this white line. The white line is a guiding line. It's sort of telling you that the end point of this line is going to be situated exactly on top of the point that you started on. So this is my point, and now I've made a line in the z-axis. Okay, let's do this again, this time with a polyline. So I make a polyline, and now let's say I want to go up. I am going to click on this point, and now I'm going up. So as you see, this is now, let's say I want to go up from a random point. So I'm going to press Control, click, and now I've gone up. Okay, all right. Yeah. Well, I'm just going to delete this. And now let's play with this line a little bit. So what I'm going to do is follow the similar process that we did yesterday. I'm just going to rebuild this curve. I'm just going to say rebuild, select this curve, and number of points, well, let's say 6, and degree 3. Okay, so now I have these 6 control points. I'm going to select some of them and just randomly move them apart. Let's say I'm going to move this like this, and this goes this way probably. Okay, this is a good enough curve that I have. Sorry. Now, what I'm going to do is, it is similar to Extrude, but in Extrude, what we did was we had, let's say, a curve like this, and we moved this curve in a direction. The default direction was Z, so we moved it in the Z direction. Right now, what we have is a similar curve, and we are going to revolve it to make a surface. So that's the command. It says revolve. Curve. Okay, this is the curve. And saying axis, start of revolve axis. I'm going to say this is the start of the revolve axis. Now it's saying what's the end of the revolve axis? Like it wants to know where it's going to revolve. So I'm just propping up the Z, and now it says what angle do you want to start off with? The default is 0. I'm going to say okay, start with the 0. And what is the revolution angle? How much do you want to revolve? The complete 360 or 90 or 180? So I'm going to say just go with the complete 360. Even now it has the other options, like you want to delete the input, you want to deform it to be on a full circle. So when you say full circle, the revolution angle just goes to 360. And you want to split at tangents, as in if you have some kinks on the curve, do you want to split it on those parts? So the default is no, and I'm going to keep it like that. In fact, the curve doesn't have any kinks, so that doesn't really matter. So 360 degree, and we have our little vase over here, which is obviously useless because it's hollow on both the sides. Well, now that we have made some surfaces and we know that they are open surfaces, how do we know that they are open surfaces? Well, we can see that they are open, but then there's another way to look at these surfaces, and that's when the properties ribbon comes in useful. You see this little rainbow circle, that's the properties ribbon. Just click on it. It is going to give you all the information related to the objects that are selected. So if I select the little vase, it says surface. It doesn't say closed surface, but yeah, the surface is open. This is open extrusion. Well, yeah, the extrusion is open because we said, hey, we don't want it to be a solid. So that's why it is open. Well, what if I want to close these surfaces? There is a very simple command, and it is called as cap. I'm going to say cap. Select surfaces or poly surfaces to cap. I'm going to say, okay, cap this guy. And now it's capped. You can see it is no more hollow. And now if I select this, it says closed solid poly surface. Okay, so these are the very simple, very basic surface commands that are available in Rhino. There are many more, and we're going to see some more of them, but these are the most simplest ones. Any doubts as of now? So if you have any doubts, a minute for the doubts. If you want to try this, you can go ahead and try, and maybe you can ask me some doubts if you try and cannot do it. Well, there are plenty ways in which you can make surfaces, and sometimes it's a combination of a lot of different tools and commands to make a surface or make some modifications on a given surface. And as you know, the way with tools, there are almost infinite ways of achieving something with a given set of tools. So like a person might have a combination of A, B, C, D in that order, whereas someone else might go with another order of setting up the tools and still achieving the same thing. But it's all up to you, what you are convenient to with, what you're comfortable with, and how you understand how to make a geometry. So like the moment you see how geometry the moment you see the geometry, you can sort of dissect it and you can sort of understand how it's going to be made. And that's really the understanding of digital sculpting. So it's like you're really sculpting this form from various different tools that we use. Okay, someone has a question, I believe. What did you mean by kinks in a curve? Yeah, like we discussed yesterday, when you have a curve and you have some points on the curve which are not acting as control points, as in when you have points on a curve which do not really shape the curve in a smooth way, but it leaves kinks on the curve, sharp edges on the curve. These are called as kinks, like kinks in any surface. So these are sharp edges which are going to break a curve. We will see how to add kinks and how to possibly remove kinks when we deal with a lot of surfaces. But for now, I think when you have a polyline is a line with a lot of with a collection of points, a line which is joining points, and the points on the polylines act as kinks for that polyline, because when you move them, it's sharp edges. It's not a smooth curve. Okay, is that okay? Yeah. Well, also, when we say that, when I stop sometimes and say, hey guys, do you have any doubts? And you know, it might take you some time to type that doubt, and maybe I might move on to the next thing. So if you have a doubt, just use the there's a feature called as raise your hand. You know, so just raise your hand on the on the application, and then I'll know that, okay, yes, someone is going to ask me a doubt, and then I'll be waiting with a drum roll. So moving on, and assuming that no one else has any doubts, and yes, so let's move on with some more commands to make some surfaces. The next one that we're going to see is a way of making surfaces on by using different combinations of curves. So like when we said that, okay, extrusion is you have a curve and then you move it in one direction, you have an extrusion. Revolve is when you have a curve and you revolve it around a certain axis and then you have a surface. Now we're going to see surfaces which are made by using two curves. So there is no axis, there is no direction, but there is a curve to follow. So like, for example, there is a curve and there is another curve, and I want to see how the surface would be made on this curve by this another curve if I move it on this curve. So yeah, let's see how that is done. So I'm going to make two curves. One of them is going to be like so. So very quickly, I'm just going to plot some points and make a curve around it. I'm going to use a command which is called as Interpolate Curve, or short for Interp Curve. So what this allows me to do is it makes a curve for whatever degree that it shows here. So it says degree of 3. It's going to make a curve on these points. So you might say that it's similar to something like spline from AutoCAD. So yeah, this is basically a spline. This is what a spline looks like, that it has variable radii all along the curve, and there are various points for all these curves who act as center. So like if you cut this into tiny chords, you'll have infinite points that show how the curvature really goes. So this is a curve that has been interpolated on some points, the points that we put, and it has its own fancy control point. So these are the curves. I'm just trying to make them slightly more healthy. By healthy, I mean that I'm going to make them less steep, so they are like slightly more smooth, and there is some kind of drama around them. You might find this also similar to the pen tool that some of you might be aware of from Adobe softwares. So this is exactly like those tools, and I'm just playing around with the control points to make it smooth. Okay, so I have a curve which looks like this. Now I'm just going to make another curve, and this is the one. So I've just made a line in the z-axis. I'm just going to rebuild it like we always do. Rebuild it to whatever, and then you have this. Well, some of you might ask, well, Angad, is this the only way to make curves? No, not really. But this is the way in which you can make the curves in a more healthy way. Like, the curves will be smoother, the curves will not have kinks, will not have surfaces which are intersecting with other surfaces and itself. So this is a healthy way to make curves. So this is the formation of the control points, and I'm just moving them like whatever. And I have this here. So I have this curve which I'm going to use as the direction of my extrusion, or basically the way in which the curve is going to move. And this is the curve which is primarily going to move on this. The command that I'm going to use for this case is called sweep. There are two kinds of sweep. There is Sweep1 and Sweep2. So Sweep1 is taking care of extrusions on one direction curve. Sweep2 takes care of two different curves. Okay, so let's go ahead and do this. So I have these curves, and I'm going to call off Sweep1, and it asks me what's the rail. So this is the rail. Now, some of you might remember that yesterday, while making the pipe, while using the pipe command, it asked us what the rail was. And we said that the logic was similar to a roller coaster where you have a rail going all around and then a car sitting on top of it and moving all around. So yes, this is the same logic. So when it says what is the rail, it is asking for the rail, the pathway of the roller coaster, and we have given the rail, like we have inputted the rail, and now it's asking for the cross section curve. So the cross section is somewhat like the car. It's on top of this curve and it's going to move as the car moves. As the rail moves. So I'm going to select the cross section curve. You would notice that it says select cross section curves. So you can select just one rail, but you can select infinite amount of curves. The way you want this surface to move, you can just pick whatever you want, as long as they are there on the rail. Okay, so I'm going to pick this section, cross section curve. And since you can pick any amount of cross section curves, it says tell me when you're done picking the cross section curves. So okay, we are done. So I'm going to press enter, and it makes this surface, but it is not done yet because it has opened this dialog box which says what are the options you want. So right now, the main option that you want to take care of is what kind of frame style you want. So the default option in your case might be freeform. Freeform is when you want the curve to go with the direction of the curve. Okay, and road-like is when you want the rail to behave like a road, not like a rail and having its own directions, but behave like a road. We'll see two options to see the difference between these two cases. Okay, so I'm just going to go with freeform, and I'm going to say do not change cross sections. If I want some more cross section, if I want some more control points, I could say, you know, with these control points or more, and it makes those kind of changes in it, as you can see here. So it will have 50 control points, like, just to give more options. Also, you can see that all these control points have made some really nice and healthy lines and curves. That's because the curves that we started with were healthy. So none of these ISO curves, none of these construction lines that are making the surfaces, none of them are intersecting into each other. Like, you might see this black botch, but that's because of the visualization. Okay. You could also say, no, I don't want for control points. I want it to fit a certain tolerance. So these are basically something like tolerances. Okay. So I'm just going to say, do not change cross sections. So don't change anything. Don't rebuild them or don't refit them to a certain tolerance. But I'm going to say, just don't change anything. And the surface is made. Okay. Let's see what happens if I change the curves a little bit. So I'm just going to select them and copy them over here. Now, what I'm going to do with this guy is I'm going to control the control points and move them a little bit, like so. Okay, so I don't have a flat curve or a flat rail. My rail is also now having its own kind of fun. So yeah, let's keep it simple. So I go ahead again, sweep one. What's my rail? This is my rail. What's my cross section? This is my cross section. And I would press it. And now you see what's happening here. So since the rail was moving around. My curve has gone all around the rail, and the rail has absolutely taken it to town. So it's like the roller coaster was going in a straight direction, but now the rail of the roller coaster is moving in different directions, and now the car is going to move with it as well. So, but that's happening because of the freeform. If I say keep it road-like, it will keep it as flat as much as it can. Okay, you can also see that these are the intersections that I was talking about. This is not a healthy surface. This surface is going to intersect into itself, and it's going to create a lot of anomalies. But this is how it works. I can now say refit or rebuild for more control points, and you still see that some of these surfaces are not really behaving in a right way. Oh well, that's another take at sweep. Okay, let's see the sweep too, and then we will try on, as in you can try on your computers. Oops. I'm going to select both of these curves very carefully, and I'm going to press Alt, and then I have it made as a copy. If you want to add something to your selection, you can press Shift and then click on the object. It gets added to the selection. If you want to remove something from your selection, you press Control and then make the selection again, and then the object that you have deselected will get deselected from the selection. I hope you understand the whole thing. Yeah. So Shift is to add something, Control is to remove something. Okay. Now we had one rail, and the car was moving on the rail, and the whole roller coaster was working that way. Now imagine that this rail is not a single rail, is a combination of two rails, and the car is not a metal car, but it's made out of an elastic material. So if the rails go really apart, then the car is going to expand. So that's the whole idea of Sweep2. So let's say I'm going to copy the same curve, and I'm going to keep it on the other end of the curve of my car curve. So this is the curve that I want to copy. It gets copied from this point to this point. And now I'm going to play with its control points. These two, maybe these three, are going to go down a bit, and these are going to go a bit up. Okay. Yeah, that seems fair. Okay, let's see. So this is where both of these curves have started. These are the two rails, and this one is going to be the car, the cross-section curve. So I'm going to say sweep 2 this time. Select first rail. Okay. It doesn't say select rail, first rail. The moment I select it, it doesn't even wait for me to press space. No, I'm just allowed to select one object. So Rhino is making the decision. So the next click is the second rail. And now it says select as many cross-section curves as you want. So this is the only one. And I hit space. And now it gives me some different kinds of options. As in, they're similar options, but just reordered in a slightly weird way. So that's the tolerance. But right now, you don't have anything that says, freeform or blah, 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 or such and such. Right now, there is just one curve. That's why you don't have all the options displayed. Some of them are grayed out. That's because the curve is just one curve. There's no multiple curves. There aren't any things that are making a mess on it. But apart from the things that you saw before, there's something called as add slash in it. Now, what is this add slash? What happens if I press the add slash? If I press add slash, it asks me if I want to select some points on any of these rails. So like if I select a point on this rail and this rail, you see there is a certain disturbance that has been added to my surface. If I add this, there is another disturbance which has been added to my really uniform looking surface. Okay, I'm going to say no, I don't want any of this. I cancel it. I'm just going to cancel it again, and I'm going to make the whole thing again. Sweep 2, first rail, second rail, cross section curve, and done. So this is the surface. Looks quite smooth and has lots of possibilities. But now what has happened is, like as in apart from expanding the car, what has happened is the car has the same kind of geometry at the other edge as well. What if I don't want it to be like this? What if I want it some other way? Well, I can make that choice. Like for example, if I want some other geometry here, I make a line and I'm going to say rebuild, same thing, and then just move these points a little bit. Okay. Oh, I'm doing the same thing again. Dang. Yep. So we have something different now. I hope. Yes. And I'm going to sweep. First rail, second rail, and now it says cross section curves. Okay, 1 and 2. So now it restricts itself to whatever curve I give as the second cross section curve. Okay. So I'm going to keep this thing open, but at the same time, I'm going to allow you guys to do this at your end on your computers, and I'm going to give you something like 5 minutes or so. So try it right now and tell me if you have any doubts. Okay. So, any doubts until now? Just raise your hand, and the moderators will uh, probably like give you an opportunity to ask. Okay, I am assuming that all of you are done by this point, and you have obviously tried the extrude, the revolve, and both the sweeps by this point, and you have an idea of how to to get to some shapes that you probably desire to make in this fashion. Well, we will see two more, or let's say, yeah, just one more tool, one more command on how to make surfaces from curves. This one is slightly special. It's called as Loft, and it's a way of making surfaces on curves which are piled on top of each other, or are in a certain direction, or in whichever way. So we saw a way to make a surface by moving the curve in a direction, by revolving the curve around an axis. Then we also saw how to make a surface by moving a cross section on a curve, on a rail. And then we also saw on how it would go on two rails. So yes,